Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a time unlike any other in our nation's history. The stakes are higher, the divisions deeper, and the choice is more consequential than perhaps any generation before us. Yet the truth is this presidencies are not decided only by campaign slogans, by debates, or by the money poured into advertisements. They are decided by something far more subtle, far more powerful, and far more invisible to the untrained eye. They are decided by the unseen battleground of the mind. This one mental shift, simple yet profound, can determine not only who rises to power in the next presidency, but also the destiny of an entire nation. And I stand before you to say, it is not only politicians who must make this shift, it is every American, every leader, every citizen who dares to dream of a freer, stronger, more prosperous country. Because leadership does not begin in the White House. It begins in the house of the mind. Pause for a moment and reflect. Every great leader in history, whether admired or despised, first won the war of thought before they won the war of votes. The greatest armies, the loudest voices, the deepest pockets, none of these can sustain power without the foundation of mental mastery. And it is here, in this battlefield of thought, that presidencies are decided long before ballots are cast. So what is this one shift? It is the shift from fear-driven thinking to purpose-driven thinking. That single change, the movement from fear to purpose, is the difference between leaders who crumble under pressure and leaders who rise to command the tides of history. It is the difference between a nation enslaved by doubt and a nation propelled by vision. And in the coming election, it will be the difference between a president who reacts to the storms of the moment and one who builds a future that endures beyond their term. Fear is the weapon of mediocrity. Purpose is the engine of greatness. Now, you may ask, why does this matter in politics? Because fear has always been the most profitable currency in Washington. Fear elects politicians. Fear sells newspapers. Fear fills campaign coffers. Fear divides people into camps, drives them into corners, and blinds them from seeing the bigger picture. But history shows us something else. Though fear can build movements quickly, it cannot sustain them. Fear collapses. Fear corrodes. Fear destroys from within. Purpose, however, ignites nations. Purpose unites where fear divides. Purpose inspires sacrifice, courage, and vision. Purpose produces policies that outlast terms and ideas that transform societies. Purpose does not fade when the media spotlight shifts. It grows brighter with every challenge. And this is the shift that will decide the next presidency. Will America choose fear, or will America choose purpose? Will the next leader operate from a place of panic, reaction, and division, or from a place of clarity, vision, and conviction? Let us go deeper. Every individual who seeks power must face two voices within themselves. The first voice whispers, play it safe. Say what they want to hear. Avoid risk. Protect your position. Exploit their fears. That is the voice of fear. It is seductive. It promises security. But it always leads to weakness. The second voice commands. Stand for something greater than yourself. Speak truth even when it costs you. Take risks for the sake of freedom. Lead with vision, not calculation. That is the voice of purpose. It is demanding. It often invites criticism, but it always leads to strength. Every president we have ever had was ultimately shaped not by polls or policies, but by which voice they chose to obey. And in 2025 and beyond, this truth has never been more urgent. Now, think about this principle not just in terms of leaders, but in terms of the people. A nation itself is but a collection of individual minds. If the majority of citizens live in fear, fear of the economy, fear of the future, fear of each other, then fear-driven leaders will rise to power. But if the majority shift their minds to purpose, to building, to contributing, to uniting, to daring, then leaders of purpose will emerge. It begins not in the White House, but in your house. It begins not with their mindset, but with yours. Ask yourself today, are you being ruled by fear, or are you being driven by purpose? For this one mental shift from fear to purpose is not just about elections. It is about the very destiny of your life. It is about whether you will shrink when the storms of life rage, or whether you will stand and declare, I was born for this challenge. I was born for this time. I will not bow to fear. I will lead with purpose. Greatness has never been built in comfort zones. It has always been forged in the fires of uncertainty. And that is why this next election is not only a test of candidates. It is a test of us. It is a mirror reflecting whether we as a people are led by fear or by purpose. Now let me be clear. Fear disguises itself well. It can look like caution. It can sound like logic. It can masquerade as practicality. But beneath all its masks, fear has one goal: to keep you small, to keep you divided, to keep you from realizing your power. Purpose, on the other hand, calls you higher. It demands sacrifice. It demands clarity. It demands that you endure criticism, rejection, and setbacks. But purpose gives you the power to move mountains, to rewrite laws, to shape history itself. Think about Abraham Lincoln. In his time, the nation was torn apart by division. Fear was everywhere. The voices of doubt surrounded him. He could have yielded. He could have led cautiously, playing to both sides, protecting his political position. But he made the shift. He chose purpose over fear. And because of that choice, the course of American history was altered forever. Think about Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Great Depression had broken the spirit of the nation. Fear was the air Americans breathed. But he made the shift. He gave a voice to purpose when he declared, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And that one idea lifted a nation from despair toward resilience. Think about John F. Kennedy. The Cold War had wrapped the world in a cloak of fear. He could have played it safe, avoiding bold commitments. But he chose purpose when he declared that America would land on the moon. Not because it was easy, but because it was hard. And that purpose drove a generation to dream bigger than fear allowed. These were not perfect men. They were flawed just like every leader and every one of us. But their greatness did not come from perfection. It came from that one mental shift from fear to purpose. And the same truth holds today. The presidency will not be decided by money alone, by media spin, or by manipulation. It will be decided by which candidate embodies purpose with greater conviction, and by whether the American people themselves demand purpose over fear. But let us not stop there, because this principle is not just about politics. It is about your family, your business, your career, your future. When you face a choice, when the unknown looms large, what voice do you obey? The voice of fear or the voice of purpose? Do you hide behind excuses or do you rise with courage? Do you shrink into doubt or do you stand in vision? Do you chase comfort or do you embrace destiny? The same principle that decides presidencies also decides your life. The invisible war is raging right now, not just in Washington, but in your mind. And the side that wins will determine not only who leads the country, but also who you become in your own life. I say to you today, refuse to be ruled by fear. Do not give it the throne of your mind. Do not allow it to dictate your choices. Cast it down. Replace it with purpose. Replace it with vision. Replace it with faith in something greater than yourself. For if you do, you will not only transform your own life, you will transform the destiny of this nation. Imagine what would happen if millions of Americans made this shift. Imagine if instead of scrolling in fear, they started building in purpose. Imagine if instead of voting from panic, they voted from vision. Imagine if instead of letting the media manipulate their emotions, they trained their minds to focus on what matters most. That is how nations change, not from the top down, but from the inside out. The one mental shift that could decide the next presidency is the same shift that could decide your destiny, the shift from fear to purpose. History will record this moment. It will record what kind of leaders we choose, but more importantly, it will record what kind of people we chose to be. Will we cower in fear, or will we rise in purpose? The decision is yours. The decision is ours. The decision is now. Today we confront a reality that has shaped every election, every campaign, every debate, and every headline in our nation's history. A truth that has been whispered in shadows but rarely declared with boldness. It is this: fear has been the oldest, most reliable currency of politics. And yet, in this new age, when the destiny of nations hangs in the balance, that currency is collapsing. Fear is losing its power. And what must replace it? What must take its throne is purpose. Because fear can purchase obedience, but only purpose can inspire greatness. Think about it. For centuries, rulers and leaders have wielded fear as their strongest weapon. They have used it to divide citizens, to silence opposition, to consolidate power. Fear has been the cheapest way to control the masses, and history shows us its fingerprints everywhere, from the tyrants of ancient empires to the manipulative strategies of modern politics. Fear whispers, "You are in danger." Fear shouts, "They are your enemy." Fear manipulates, "Only I can protect you." And for too long, people have paid the price of their freedom in exchange for the illusion of safety. But here is the paradox of fear, While it can win elections, it cannot build nations. While it can secure temporary victories, it cannot create enduring legacies. While it can silence the people for a time, it cannot ignite the spirit of progress. That is why I say with absolute conviction, fear is the old currency of politics. But purpose is the new power. Let us take a journey through history to prove this truth. When Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before a nation paralyzed by the Great Depression, fear was everywhere. Banks had collapsed, unemployment soared, and hope was scarce. He could have exploited fear to consolidate his control. He could have deepened the panic to make people cling to his leadership. Instead, he declared, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." In that single statement, he robbed fear of its currency. He shifted the collective mind of the nation toward courage, resilience, and purpose. That was not just politics. That was leadership. When John F. Kennedy spoke to the nation about going to the moon, the Cold War loomed like a shadow over America's future. Fear of nuclear destruction gripped the world. Kennedy could have spoken only of defense and survival, but he shifted the focus. He called upon purpose, declaring that America would go to the moon, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. He replaced fear with vision, and in doing so, inspired a generation to believe in possibilities greater than their anxieties. That was not just strategy. That was destiny in motion. And when Martin Luther King, Jr. stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, the nation trembled with fear of change, fear of equality, fear of the unknown future of race in America. He could have railed against enemies, but instead he spoke of a dream. He invoked purpose, not panic. And his words still echo today because purpose always outlives fear. This pattern repeats across the ages. Fear builds compliance, but purpose builds civilizations. Now, let us look at the present moment. We live in a time when fear has been commercialized, weaponized, and broadcasted 24 hours a day. Media companies profit from fear. Political campaigns thrive on fear. Social media algorithms magnify fear. Everywhere you look, fear is marketed like a product: fear of the economy, fear of immigrants, fear of the future, fear of one another. But here is what must be understood: fear is a debt-based currency. It always takes more than it gives. When you live by fear, you are always borrowing energy from tomorrow to pay for survival today. And like all debt-based systems, it eventually collapses. Purpose, however, is an investment-based currency. It multiplies, it compounds, it creates dividends for generations to come. Leaders who trade in purpose invest in the future of their nation. Leaders who trade in fear mortgage the future for short-term gain. This is why purpose must become the new power in politics, in leadership, and in life. Think about the leaders who stand tallest in history. Were they remembered because they terrified people into submission, or because they inspired people to rise higher? History forgets the fearmongers. It immortalizes the visionaries. But what exactly is purpose in the realm of politics? Purpose is clarity of vision that extends beyond the election cycle. Purpose is the courage to choose what is right over what is easy. Purpose is the refusal to exploit division, and instead the determination to build unity. Purpose is leadership anchored not in manipulation, but in meaning. Fear says, "Vote for me, or disaster will strike." Purpose says, "Join me, and together we will build something worthy of the future." Fear says, "The other side is your enemy." Purpose says, "We are one people facing one destiny." Fear says, "You are powerless without me." Purpose says, "You are powerful, and I will help you unleash that power." Now, let us bring this truth closer to home. The same principle that applies to politics applies to your life. Fear is the old currency of your past. How many times have you allowed fear to make your decisions? Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of loss. Fear convinced you to shrink back when you could have leapt forward. Fear sold you safety but delivered regret. But when you have lived with purpose, when you have pursued something meaningful, when you have stood for something larger than yourself, you have felt the power that no fear can equal. Purpose energizes you. Purpose sustains you. Purpose transforms obstacles into stepping stones. And so it is with nations. A nation built on fear becomes weak, divided, suspicious, and fragile. But a nation built on purpose becomes strong, united, bold, and enduring. Consider this: every great empire that collapsed did so not because of external enemies, but because of internal fear. Fear of change, fear of the future, fear of one another. Fear hollowed them from the inside out. And every great revival in history began not with new laws or armies, but with a renewed sense of purpose among the people. This is why I tell you, the shift from fear to purpose is not optional. It is essential. It is the difference between decline and destiny. Now, you may be asking, how do we, as a people, make this shift? First, we must recognize the manipulations of fear. We must become conscious of when we are being sold fear like a product. Ask yourself, who profits from my panic? Who gains from my anxiety? Who controls me by my fear? Second, we must train our minds to anchor to vision. Instead of asking, what am I afraid of? Ask, what am I building toward? Instead of reacting to threats, focus on opportunities. Third, we must demand from our leaders not the easy currency of fear, but the harder, richer currency of purpose. We must stop rewarding those who divide us with fear and start supporting those who inspire us with vision. Fourth, we must embody purpose ourselves. For leadership is not only for presidents or politicians. Leadership is for parents, for workers, for dreamers, for every soul who influences another. When you live with purpose, you multiply power. When you lead with purpose, you shift the culture. Fear is contagious, but so is purpose. And the contagion you spread will shape not only your future, but the future of your community, your nation, and your world. Let us speak plainly, fear is cheap. Anyone can use it. That is why so many do. But purpose is costly. It demands discipline, clarity, and courage. That is why so few embrace it. But those who do become the architects of destiny. When fear reigns, nations stumble. When purpose reigns, nations rise. This is not philosophy. It is history. This is not theory. It is truth. And here is the ultimate revelation. Every election, every movement, every presidency, every destiny comes down to this one choice. Will we transact in the old currency of fear, or will we invest in the new power of purpose? That choice will decide the future. That choice will decide the next leader. That choice will decide you. My friends, we must confront a truth that too few are willing to speak aloud. Leadership is not granted by elections. It is not sealed by oaths. And it is not contained within the walls of the White House. Leadership begins in the unseen place, the battlefield of the mind. The destiny of presidents, senators, governors, and even ordinary citizens is not shaped first in offices, courts, or campaign rallies. It is shaped in thought. Long before power is visible to the world, it is invisible, pulsing in the hidden chambers of belief, conviction, and vision. For the greatest deception of our age is the belief that leadership flows from position. That once a man or woman sits behind the great desk of authority, they are transformed into a leader. But history shows us again and again, some who sit in the highest seats of power never rise to the level of leadership, while others with no title at all command nations with the sheer force of their vision. It is not the building that makes the leader. It is the mind. Pause here and consider this. When George Washington led an army of poorly equipped farmers against the might of the greatest empire in the world, he had no palace, no treasury, no secure foundation of government. What did he have? He had a mind convinced of freedom, a vision greater than his circumstances, a determination forged in thought before it was proven in battle. Leadership began in his mind, not in the halls of power he would later occupy. Think of Abraham Lincoln. When he walked into the White House, the nation was divided, bleeding, on the edge of destruction. He was not handed leadership with the keys to the office. He carried it within him long before. The humility of his childhood, the fire of his convictions, the clarity of his purpose, all of this was formed in thought, tested in personal failure, refined in private struggle. By the time he entered the presidency, leadership was already carved into his very being. Now contrast this with others who have occupied high office yet led poorly. Titles did not create wisdom. Positions did not manufacture courage. Leadership was not birthed by ceremony, because leadership never begins with a chair, a title, or a paycheck. It begins with a thought. And that thought, my friends, is not simply, I want power. It is not, I deserve authority. Leadership begins with a deeper seed, I carry responsibility. I will use my life to shape something greater than myself. I will sacrifice personal comfort for collective good. This thought, this seed of purpose, takes root in the soil of the mind, and if it is nourished, it grows into the tree of leadership that no storm can uproot. But here lies the challenge. Too many chase positions before cultivating the mind. They hunger for recognition, but they neglect preparation. They grasp for authority, but they resist discipline. They want the world to follow them, yet they have never first learned to govern themselves. Let me be clear, a man who cannot rule his own thoughts cannot rule a nation. A woman who cannot master her own emotions cannot lead a people. For leadership is not the art of commanding others. It is the art of commanding oneself. Every presidency, every political victory, every seat of power ever filled was first won in the unseen place, the mind of the leader and the collective mind of the people. Before ballots are cast, before speeches are written, before laws are signed, leadership begins as a silent whisper in thought. What you think, you become. What you dwell on, you attract. What you envision, you eventually build. And so the question is not who holds office. The question is, what kind of mind holds power? Because the fate of a nation does not depend on the furniture of the White House. It depends on the furniture of the mind. Is it cluttered with fear, doubt, greed, and ego? Or is it filled with clarity, vision, courage, and conviction? Let me give you an example from beyond politics. Consider Martin Luther King, Jr. He never sat in the Oval Office. He never held elected office at all. Yet he led a movement that shook the conscience of America. Why? Because leadership was already alive in his mind. He saw beyond the chains of his time. He dared to think thoughts of freedom and equality so vividly that they ignited the imagination of millions. His leadership was not born of a title. It was born of vision. Or think of Mother Teresa. She had no army, no political authority, no wealth. Yet the sheer discipline of her thought, the clarity of her compassion, made her one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. Leadership began in her mind, and the world simply caught up to what she already believed. Do you see the pattern? The Oval Office is not the birthplace of leadership. It is the stage where leadership that already exists is revealed. And here lies the warning. If a mind has not been disciplined, purified, and strengthened before stepping into power, then power will expose the weakness, amplify it, and magnify it for the world to see. This is why so many leaders collapse under the weight of their own office. Their thoughts were never prepared to carry the burden. They believed the myth that a position creates a leader, and so they sought the position before building the mind. But history is merciless with such men. It unmasked them quickly. For the throne does not create strength. It only reveals whether strength was already there. And so I turn the question upon you. What kind of leadership are you building in your mind? Do you govern your thoughts with discipline, or do they govern you? Do you master your emotions, or are you mastered by them? Do you train your vision to see possibility in every obstacle, or do you allow fear to cloud every decision? For leadership is not the property of presidents alone. Leadership is the calling of every man, every woman, every citizen who dares to live with purpose. The White House may be the most visible symbol of leadership, but your house, your mind, is where true leadership begins. When you wake each morning, you are faced with choices. Will you let circumstances dictate your day, or will you dictate the circumstances? Will you react in fear, or will you act in purpose? Will you shrink into excuses, or will you rise with vision? Each choice is the exercise of leadership in your own life. Each choice shapes the unseen destiny of your character. And let me tell you this, nations are built not merely by presidents, but by the millions of unseen decisions of ordinary people who choose to lead themselves. When citizens discipline their minds, leaders of discipline arise. When citizens live in fear, leaders of fear emerge. When people live in vision, leaders of vision are born. The future of America, then, does not rest only in the ballot box. It rests in the mental state of its people. What you think about, you bring about. And the collective destiny of a nation is simply the sum of the thoughts its people entertain most. Leadership begins in the mind. It begins with clarity of thought, purity of motive, and strength of conviction. It is tested in the silence of your own struggles, long before the world applauds or condemns. And when it is forged in that fire, it cannot be taken away by criticism, by failure, or even by loss of office. Think of Nelson Mandela, locked away in a prison cell for 27 years, stripped of position, stripped of freedom, stripped of worldly influence. By every external measure, he had no leadership. And yet in his mind, he continued to cultivate vision, discipline, and resilience. When he walked free, he did not need to be made a leader. He already was one. The presidency simply unveiled what had already been forged in the shadows. So the truth is this: you do not need permission to lead. You do not need an office to lead. You do not need a title to lead. You need only to master the mind, for all leadership begins there. And once leadership is alive in the mind, it will inevitably manifest in reality, because the world cannot resist a mind aflame with conviction, a spirit set on purpose, and a vision too strong to be ignored. If there is one truth history has proven beyond question, it is this: nations do not rise and fall merely by the actions of their leaders. Nations rise and fall by the spirit, the thought, the invisible mindset of the people who live within them. Leaders do not appear in a vacuum. They are not accidents. They are reflections, living mirrors of the dominant thoughts, fears, and desires of the people they serve. This is why the collective mindset of the people decides the leader. Not the campaign, not the funding, not even the media, though these play their part. At the deepest level, leadership is the harvest of what has already been planted in the minds of millions. When the people are ruled by fear, they will elevate fear-driven leaders. When the people are ruled by anger, they will call forth leaders who thrive on conflict. When the people are ruled by hope, they will follow leaders who dare to dream. And when the people are ruled by vision and purpose, they will embrace leaders who embody those very qualities. The ballot box does not decide alone. The ballot box is simply the outer expression of an inner reality. Pause for a moment and consider. Every political campaign invests millions in advertising, in messaging, in targeting. But what are they truly targeting? They are targeting the mindset of the people. They are speaking to the hidden fears, the hidden hopes, the unspoken frustrations, and the buried ambitions of the nation. A candidate succeeds not because they are the loudest, but because they resonate most deeply with the prevailing state of mind among the people. This is why no political strategy, no matter how clever, can overcome the invisible tide of public consciousness. Leaders do not create that tide. They ride it. And if they are wise, they align themselves with it. If they are blind, they are swallowed by it. Let us travel through history for a moment. When America faced the Great Depression, the collective mindset of the people was one of despair, uncertainty, and longing for stability. Out of that mindset rose Franklin D. Roosevelt, a man who captured the spirit of the people not by offering fear, but by giving them words that shifted their mindset. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That sentence worked not because it was clever rhetoric, but because it spoke to the inner condition of the people. It was what their hearts were already yearning to hear. When the nation was torn apart by slavery and division, the collective mindset of the people was boiling with conflict, pain, and an unresolved question of freedom. Out of that fire emerged Abraham Lincoln, not because he was simply ambitious, but because he became the vessel for the collective struggle. His leadership was the mirror of the people's turmoil and their hunger for resolution. When the Cold War gripped the world in icy fear, the people longed for vision, for someone to take them beyond the looming shadow of destruction. Out of that desire rose John F. Kennedy, who declared that America would go to the moon, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. That vision captured the spirit of a generation that was tired of fear and ready for inspiration. Do you see the pattern? Leaders are not only chosen, they are created. And who creates them? The people. The collective mindset molds the clay from which history shapes its leaders. Now, let us not romanticize this truth, for just as the collective mindset can call forth greatness, it can also summon corruption, tyranny, and mediocrity. When the people give in to apathy, when they surrender to division, when they allow themselves to be hypnotized by fear, they open the door for leaders who exploit those weaknesses. History has seen this too. Leaders who rose not to uplift, but to dominate, because the people's mindset gave them permission. The principle is the same, whether it builds or destroys. The people decide not with their lips, but with their thoughts. Here lies the most urgent question of our time. What is the mindset of America today? Look around you. Listen to the conversations in your communities, your workplaces, your families. Observe the tone of the media, the pulse of social networks, the mood of the nation. Is the collective mindset one of hope or one of fear? One of unity or one of division? One of vision or one of survival? Because whatever it is, that is the kind of leader who will rise next. Do not be deceived into thinking your thoughts are private, isolated, meaningless. When multiplied across millions of citizens, they form a tidal wave that sweeps entire governments into power. This is the invisible law of leadership. The leader is the people in concentrated form. This truth should not frighten you. It should awaken you. because it means that real change begins not in Washington, not in campaigns, but in the minds of everyday people. If you want different leaders, you must first become a different thinker. If you want leaders of vision, you must cultivate vision within yourself. If you want leaders of integrity, you must practice integrity in your own life. If you want leaders of courage, you must become courageous in the face of your own fears. For leaders reflect the people, and the people shape the leaders. It is easy to sit back and blame politicians for the state of the nation. It is easy to point fingers and say, they are corrupt, they are weak, they are greedy. But remember this, no leader holds power without the permission of the people. Permission may be active through votes and applause, or it may be passive through silence and indifference. But permission is always given. If you say you want better leaders, ask yourself, are you living as the kind of citizen who produces better leaders? Think of a garden. The leader is the fruit, but the people are the soil. If the soil is polluted with fear, with anger, with apathy, then the fruit will be poisoned. If the soil is rich with purpose, with vision, with unity, then the fruit will be nourishing. You cannot curse the fruit while neglecting the soil. Now, let us go deeper still. The collective mindset is not merely what people think. It is how people think. It is the pattern of thought, the habits of attention, the reflexes of belief. And these are shaped every day by what people choose to consume, what they choose to repeat, what they choose to believe. If the people spend their days consuming anger, they will produce angry leaders. If the people spend their days feeding on fear, they will produce fearful leaders. If the people spend their days dividing themselves into camps, they will produce leaders who thrive on division. But if the people discipline their minds to focus on vision, to cultivate faith, to demand truth, they will produce leaders who carry those very qualities. This is why every citizen holds power beyond measure. Your thoughts are not small. They are part of a great collective river that feeds the reservoir from which leaders are chosen. You are responsible not only for your own destiny, but for the destiny of your nation. Some may resist this truth. They may say, what difference can one person make in a country of millions? But I say to you one thought, multiplied millions of times is what makes the difference. Every movement in history began with a small number of individuals who shifted their mindset, and by doing so, they shifted the mindset of the people, and by doing so, they shifted the course of nations. If you doubt this, look to the movements that have shaped history. A single cry for freedom, repeated across towns and villages, gave birth to revolutions. A single vision for equality, spoken by one voice, multiplied in the hearts of millions, overturned centuries of injustice. A single declaration of possibility, believed by enough people, took humanity from the ground to the stars. Do not underestimate the power of your thoughts. Do not underestimate the responsibility you bear. For in your private moments of reflection, in your words around the dinner table, in the energy you carry into conversations, you are contributing to the collective mindset. And that collective mindset will one day decide who leads you, who represents you, who speaks on behalf of your nation. This is why mindset is not a personal luxury. It is a civic duty. It is not enough to demand great leaders while living small in your own thinking. It is not enough to complain about corruption while tolerating dishonesty in your own life. It is not enough to demand vision while refusing to lift your own eyes above fear. The leader you want begins with the person you choose to be. The collective mindset of the people decides the leader, and the collective mindset of the people is made up of the individual mindset of you and me and every citizen alive today. So the question we must wrestle with is this: what kind of mindset are we cultivating? What kind of soil are we preparing? What kind of fruit do we expect to harvest? Because we cannot escape this truth. Whatever is dominant in the minds of the people will eventually sit in the seat of power. If division dominates, division will rule. If fear dominates, fear will govern. If purpose dominates, purpose will lead. If vision dominates, vision will guide the way forward. And this means we live in a world defined by invisible forces, not the winds we can feel on our skin, not the earthquakes that shake the ground, but the unseen winds of thought, the silent tremors of the human mind. And within that unseen world, one power has silently shaped every age of history, every nation's destiny, and every individual's future. That power is fear. Fear is as old as mankind. It whispers in the shadows of our earliest memories. It haunted our ancestors when they faced the wilderness. It lurks in the corners of boardrooms today. Fear is the great divider. It builds walls. Walls between nations, walls between communities, walls between individuals, and most tragically, walls inside our own hearts. Yet, as powerful as fear is, there exists an even greater force. A force that does not divide but unites. A force that does not shrink back but reaches forward. A force that does not cage the human spirit but releases it to soar. That force is purpose. Fear builds walls. Purpose builds bridges. And in this truth lies the secret to every life, every success, every nation's rise or fall. Let us pause and examine what fear really is. Fear is anticipation of loss. Fear is the imagination corrupted, turned against itself. Fear convinces us that the unknown is always dangerous, that tomorrow cannot be trusted, that our neighbor must be guarded against. Fear is the builder of barriers. It constructs prisons for our potential and convinces us that those prisons are protection. When nations give in to fear, they build literal walls, walls of steel, walls of policy, walls of ideology. They draw boundaries not to define themselves, but to divide themselves. Fear whispers, protect what is yours, because someone is always coming to take it away. And so, fear builds. It builds high. It builds thick. It builds in the dark. But what does purpose do? Purpose builds bridges. Purpose does not deny the reality of danger. It does not close its eyes to risk, but it refuses to be paralyzed by it. Purpose asks not, how do I protect myself? But, how do I connect? How do I contribute? How do I create? Where fear says, stay out, purpose says, come in. Where fear isolates, purpose unites. Where fear builds walls of suspicion, purpose builds bridges of understanding. Where fear locks the door, purpose opens the gate. Every great achievement in human history was the work of bridge builders, not wall makers. The Wright brothers faced the fear of gravity, the fear of ridicule, the fear of failure. They could have built walls of doubt and stayed grounded like everyone else. But they chose purpose, and purpose built a bridge between the earth and the sky. Thomas Edison faced the darkness of repeated failure. He could have built a wall of excuses after 10,000 attempts that didn't work. But he chose purpose, and purpose built a bridge that brought light to every home. Martin Luther King, Jr. faced the towering walls of hatred and prejudice. Fear said, protect yourself, stay silent, blend in, but he chose purpose. And purpose built a bridge strong enough to carry an entire movement toward justice. History is not written by those who built walls out of fear. It is written by those who built bridges out of purpose. Now, you and I may not be inventors, civil rights leaders, or pioneers of flight, but the same truth applies to our lives. Every day, in the silence of your mind, you are either building walls of fear or bridges of purpose. Think of your relationships. Fear builds walls in marriages, in friendships, in families. Fear whispers, don't be vulnerable. Don't open up. Don't trust too much because you might get hurt. And so people withdraw, keeping parts of themselves locked away, building walls where there should be connection. Purpose, on the other hand, builds bridges in relationships. Purpose says, I will love even if it costs me. I will forgive even when it is hard. I will connect even if it requires vulnerability. And that bridge creates trust, intimacy, and unbreakable bonds. Think of your career. Fear builds walls when you say, I won't apply for that promotion. I won't start that business. I won't speak up with my idea. Fear convinces you that the unknown is fatal, that the risk is unbearable. And so you build a wall around your potential and live inside a prison of mediocrity. But purpose builds bridges in your career. Purpose says, I will take the step. I will risk failure. I will pursue the work that matters, not just the work that is safe. And that bridge leads to growth, to impact, to success that endures. Think of our communities, our nation, even our politics. Fear builds walls between us and them. Fear magnifies differences and minimizes similarities. Fear says, they are not like you. They cannot be trusted. Protect your side. And so walls rise higher, walls of division, suspicion, hatred. But purpose builds bridges across communities. Purpose says, yes, we are different, but we share something greater. We share a desire for freedom, for progress, for dignity. Purpose does not erase differences. It connects across them. It builds bridges strong enough to carry the weight of disagreement, yet wide enough to allow unity to cross. Fear builds walls. Purpose builds bridges. Why is this so? Because fear looks inward while purpose looks outward. Fear is obsessed with self-preservation, but purpose is consumed with contribution. Fear shrinks the world into a small, locked room. Purpose expands it into a vast landscape of possibility. Let me tell you something you must never forget. Every wall fear builds eventually becomes a cage. At first, it looks like safety. At first, it feels like protection. But over time, you realize the wall that was built to keep danger out has also kept opportunity out. The wall that was meant to shield you has also trapped you. The prison of fear is self-made, but it is real. But every bridge purpose builds becomes a pathway. At first, it looks uncertain. At first, it feels risky. But over time, you realize the bridge that carried you over the unknown has also carried you into new horizons. Purpose does not trap you, it frees you. Purpose does not limit you, it expands you. Purpose does not isolate you, it connects you. Fear builds walls, purpose builds bridges. Now, let us look at the deeper psychology of this truth. Fear is rooted in survival instinct. It is the most basic program of the human mind: fight, flight, freeze. It has kept humanity alive for millennia. But survival is not the same as living. Fear may keep you alive, but it cannot make you thrive. Fear preserves the body, but kills the spirit. Purpose, on the other hand, is rooted in vision. It transcends survival. It asks not, how do I protect my life, but what will I do with my life? Purpose elevates you beyond instinct and into intention. It is what separates existence from meaning, survival from significance. When you live by fear, you exist in reaction. Life happens to you, and you retreat. When you live by purpose, you exist in creation. Life happens through you, and you advance. Fear responds to circumstances. Purpose shapes them. Fear is defensive. Purpose is offensive. Fear looks backward. Purpose looks forward. And this is why, in every arena of life, the builders of walls fade into history's shadows, while the builders of bridges shine as its architects. Think of the Berlin Wall. Built out of fear, it stood as a monument to division. But it could not last. Walls built on fear always crumble, because fear itself is unsustainable. Now think of the Golden Gate Bridge. Built with purpose, it united communities, created opportunity, and became a symbol of connection. Decades later, it still stands, not as a relic of division, but as a monument of possibility. Fear builds walls, purpose builds bridges. And you must decide today which you will build. Because every thought is a brick, every decision is a stone, every belief is a beam. Day by day, choice by choice, you are constructing either a wall of fear or a bridge of purpose. Will you hide behind excuses, or will you connect with courage? Will you lock yourself in doubt, or will you open yourself to destiny? Will you let fear divide you, or will you let purpose unite you? Fear builds walls, purpose builds bridges. This is not just poetry. This is practical truth. If you build walls of fear in your finances, fear of risk, fear of loss, fear of opportunity, you will lock yourself out of prosperity. But if you build bridges of purpose, bridges of investment, bridges of creativity, bridges of service, you will open doors to abundance. If you build walls of fear in your personal growth, fear of change, fear of failure, fear of judgment, you will stay trapped in the same place year after year. But if you build bridges of purpose, bridges of learning, bridges of courage, bridges of resilience, you will cross into new levels of greatness. Fear builds walls, purpose builds bridges.